Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your clients' peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
All right, welcome back to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Katie Beth Hand, and my guest today is Family Wealth Protection Plan attorney, Richard Kerbawy. Richard, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Honored to be here, and thank you for taking time with me this morning.
Absolutely. So before we dive in, I would love for you to tell our listeners a little bit about your background and what made you want to become an attorney.
Well, growing up in a small farming community in southern Michigan, I really didn't know city life at all. There was a couple thousand people in town, but my mother was raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and her brother was a lawyer. And I remember being on, I don't know if you remember these shows that were on TV where they would invite you to go to a TV station and you were a little kid, 5, 6, 7 years of age. And they had like Bozo the Clown there, and they had the other things, and you'd sit in there and you'd watch a cartoon, but then they would interview some of the kids. And one of the kids who was interviewed out of Toledo was this little farm kid out of Blissfield, Michigan. And they said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to be a lawyer." Well, I had no clue at 6 years old what a lawyer did and what a lawyer does, but I knew my uncle was a lawyer and I liked him, so I want to be like him. So fast forward to college, I really wanted to be a doctor, but biology and chemistry didn't want me to be a doctor. So in college, biology classes and the chemistry classes were foundational to going into sciences and math and medicine and all that. So the easy switch was pre-law, and I wound up being involved in the Senate at the university where I went to school. I was on the Judicial board there that ruled on behavior of students. I became Chief Justice of that board. And then when I got into law school, I got involved working for a judge as a law clerk, a circuit judge here in Ingham in Michigan, and wound up finding I liked judging. I thought that was something that would be interesting. So when I left there, I wound up becoming an assistant prosecuting attorney. And I did a lot of work with police officers, did a lot of work with social service agencies, and I saw the social service agencies doing work that was trying to save people from themselves. Saving people from themselves. And that really became a touchstone or a foundation for maybe later in life. It's just, I didn't know it at the time. We have these experiential visions that happen when we're younger, and we think, oh, that's cool. You're 20, 22, 23 years old, and you go, oh, that's cool. Well, you don't realize that's a life directing activity. So after I was an assistant prosecutor for 4 years, I had the opportunity to ascend to a judicial position. Now, I was never a judge, and I want to make it clear, I was never a judge, but I was a referee within the family court. And I worked with abused and neglected children, delinquent youth, custody cases, and I recommended things to the judges, which 99.9% of the time, they gave me the thumbs up and just signed the order. I couldn't sign the order, but I could dictate the order. And as long as what I dictated was appropriate in light of the facts and the law, the judge would sign it, it becomes the order. So everybody started calling me judge, everybody started calling me your honor. And it's a little heady, but I understood. I was humbled to the process. I wasn't made egotistical by the process. So after a period of time, 23 years of being on the bench and hearing abuse and neglect and degradation of human life like you can't imagine, I started to realize that my perspective needed to change. And I was at a point where I could retire from the court, and I went into practice, and I looked at what I wanted to do in my practice. And I was good at the family things, the divorces, but those just eat at you after a while. If you take any commitment to your clients, and if you deal with what they're going through in a divorce, when you're just ripping apart a family that's been put together for all that time, you realize that there's not a lot of joy to that. And it never seems to end. You win custody, you win a huge spousal support award, you get child support, you get custody, and 2 weeks later, you're back in court fighting because he did something or she did something to anger the other side. And now we're going back again because the kids are only 6 and 7 years of age, and they've got another 10 to 12 years of dealing with them as minors. Then they get to hate each other for the rest of their lives going forward, which is just really sad. So Jamie Moore got a hold of me, and I'd known Jamie as an assistant prosecutor back in the day when we were together. He had come out of Vietnam as an infantry officer. I had come out of campus and that kind of mentality in the late 60s, early 70s. And so we met and became friends. And after I left the bench he got a hold of me and he said, "Do you really like doing this work?" And I said, "No, I really hate it. What is there else to do?" And he said, "Let's talk about estate planning." And we did, and it transformed my life.
Absolutely. Such an interesting and unique background. How would you say, having so many years of experience dealing with family issues, how does that kind of spark your passion for family wealth planning, and how does that affect the estate planning that you do?
The interesting thing, Katie Beth, is that when you look at people who are involved in the court, you sometimes think that they're there because the system seeks them out or the system goes after them. It's actually they put themselves in the bullseye of the system by behaviors, either neglecting an issue for a child or abusing a child or harming somebody or getting involved in criminal behavior that bleeds over into their failure to care for their children, or the kids get involved in delinquent activities because they saw that from grandpa and they saw that from grandma, and then they saw it from daddy and dad and mom were maybe in jail. And so these kids go, well, that's what my family's all about. We just break the law and we abuse children and we get involved in the prison system and we get involved in drugs and we die at an early age. And the thing that was discouraging was I really believed, and I still believe, that people have choices. They have the ability to make decisions about their life. And one of the things that when I was hearing all these cases, I would hear usually 50 to 100 cases per week on abuse and neglect and delinquency. I literally preached a gospel of choice, is that I don't want you to come in front of me. I have no desire to make a decision about your life. I will, and I'm not afraid to do that, but I don't want to. And the greatest joy I would have, what you could do to please me, is take charge of your life, make responsible decisions for yourself, and keep yourself away from the bloody court. The court doesn't have the ability to solve problems. And that's part of the problem. So from a twofold standpoint, take charge of your life, make powerful decisions for yourself and your family, protect your family, and avoid the court. What is estate planning all about?
Right.
Essentially that.
Right.
And so the transition from that service mentality, and I'll tell you a quick story. When I was little, I was involved in a lot of church work and very attentive to church and very faithful to God and Jesus. And we went to a church, and they liked they knew that I had a mouth on me and I wasn't afraid to use it in a public setting. And I would sometimes do the sermons at church. And they said to me, "You would make a great priest." And arrogantly, this is my arrogance, I said, "I am not going to spend my life listening to the problems of people I don't know and try to save them from themselves." And then what did I do for 27 years? Sitting in a courtroom, day in, day out, 5 days a week, 6, 7, 8 hours on the bench. What did I do? I listened to people who I didn't know, whose problems I tried to help them solve. And it was a good living. I'm not going to sit there and complain. I'm not going to cry about the fact that I struggled and that we built a good life with our family and thankfully still have that. But it was just a life that took a lot of an emotional toll on me. So the transition to the practice of law in an estate aspect made sense to me. It just was a logical extension of a life that we like to say, I'm in charge of my life. Well, I make choices when opportunities are presented to me.
Yeah, it seems to me like in your previous career, you were almost picking up the pieces on the back end and trying to fix the problems after they'd gone wrong. Whereas in the estate planning world, the goal is to get people in and get a plan so that we can avoid all of those problems. And when I talk to our estate planning clients over and over and over, one of the things I always tell them is you have an estate plan actually, because if you don't have a plan at all, then the government is going to decide
Right.
for you where your things go and what happens. So the key when it comes to estate planning is just that it's planning. It's planning. It's planning early. It's making those decisions. It's making that plan so that one day when something happens to you, and it will, then good things happen and things are in place and you can protect your heirs and you can pass down a lot of those wisdom and values. And people that really put a big emphasis on their estate plan and get it done, and estate plans that are done really well can so positively impact a family. Whereas you've seen some of the side effects of poor planning and no planning, and how that impacts. You said it's generational. It's grandparents and it's parents, and it's you see these kids coming in for delinquency cases and all sorts of things because there was no, not necessarily not just an estate plan, but there was no wisdom and work ethic and all of these things passed down. So that's one of the things I know that we both agree on. And it's so interesting to me hearing you talk about your background and what you do now. You've looked at families from both sides, the ones you saw before where it all went wrong, and hopefully the ones that you work with now, you can get a plan for and keep on the right track. Talk to me a little bit about if there is a client who, or a listener who's listening to the show, and they don't really know anything about estate planning, they don't understand the jargon, they know they need an estate plan. If they get in touch with you, what does that process look like for them to get their estate plan started?
All right. Great question. Thank you. The thing that I would say to someone who is looking at an estate plan right now is the common mantra of 99% of the calls that we get is, I don't really have a lot, but I know that I'm supposed to do something. And we go, well, wait a minute. Okay. Having a lot or having a little does not dictate the quality of planning that you put into protecting that and protecting your family. So we talk to them about, and we have a very structured process. We actually have a laminated sheet with all of the steps of the process we go through. And we sit down in our very first meeting. We don't talk about money. We don't talk about documents. We don't talk about what your concerns are. We say, here is the process. We want to get to know them and they need to get to know us. We may find after a cup of coffee and a half an hour, 45 minutes, we don't think we can work with these individuals and these potential clients, and they may not want to work with us. So we're not here. We don't necessarily take every client who walks in the door. And I'm sure, and I know that clients have said, I don't think this is a good fit for me, and walked away. And we left in peace knowing that we presented ourselves honestly, with integrity and with clarity to our clients so that they had a choice to make in terms of whether they wanted to go forward with us or not. When we get past that phase of the process, we then have a design phase where we sit down and go through with the clients every aspect of their lives, from their current situation, what they anticipate the future to look like. And if I had the ability to predict the future, those lotto winnings would be mine. But we don't. And so we can reasonably focus on what is likely to happen in someone's life going forward. Who do you want to protect? How do you want to protect them? And that kind of conversation. And one of the things that we take great pride in is our motto is not just a peace of mind, not just a piece of paper. And what we look at with our clients is we spend a lot of time counseling with them. We are attorneys and counselors at law. And we're comfortable with the law. We feel comfortable with what we know in the law, but we don't know our clients. They are their experts about their lives. And so it's our responsibility to ask questions and listen, ask questions and listen. So after that dialogue takes place, then we sit down with them and go over what types of documents need to be prepared, what kind of concerns do they have, and how can we best address them. And some of them are right, that they may not have a lot in terms of what we typically define as financial stability or financial assets. But I look at if Bill Gates or Warren Buffett blows $1 million, what's it mean to them? Yes, it's $1 million. It's a lot of money, but it doesn't mean a lot to them. But if our clients blow a portion of their estate and they have it go someplace they don't want it to go, that's a big deal to them. And protecting that is important and helping them to see that. And it really comes down to a self-respect issue. Well, I don't have a lot, so I must not be a lot. So why should you worry about what happens to me? And that was 25 years ago working in the court. That's 2024 today working with clients. And these might be very wealthy people who just have an attitude, I don't have a lot and I don't worry, it'll go where it goes. Well, you're right. You're right. And just as you said, there is an estate plan called the State of Michigan Estate Plan, and it will go where the state says. And nobody likes government right now. And I understand some of the reasons for that. And we want to let them know you have a say in what happens with where your property goes and how things are protected. And I love the word you used in your comment a moment ago, wisdom. We believe that sharing wisdom with your children is one of the most important things that parents and grandparents can do. And when you think back to what I saw for 27 years in the courtroom, was they were sharing their wisdom. The problem was their wisdom wasn't very smart. And today, a young couple with children, they may think, why do we need an estate plan because we have young kids? Maybe the reason is they sit at our table, they take some time to talk to us about what messages are you sending to your children? What messages are you telling them about money? What messages are you telling them about respect for the parents in that home? And those children will learn what you do. Your words will not mean anything to them. They're just words because your actions are speaking so loudly. So when we talk to our clients about sharing wisdom, we're telling them how you react to money issues in your home, how you react to conflict within your home is important. And children will learn their roles. And boys will learn from dads about how to interact. Moms will learn from moms how to interact and how they relate to each other. And whether they're of the same gender or whether they're heterosexual couple, it really doesn't matter. They're going to watch these reactions by the adults, and they are watching all the time. We have our son and daughter-in-law are living with us right now while they're waiting for their home to be ready. And they have two little girls, 4 and 2. And I love having those kids around, but I have to be careful now. I can't say some of the things I might say to my wife in the privacy of her home because they're listening and they are watching. Grandpa,
yes, and
what does that
kids
mean?
repeat it. Kids repeat everything, don't they?
Absolutely. So if we can teach them the right things to repeat, like respect for money, respect for possessions, respect for each other, what a powerful lesson that is. And if we can just put that into a document that reflects what those wishes are, when mom and dad are no longer here, the kids go, Mom and Dad taught us well. They really cared about us and they really wanted us to learn something meaningful and important. That could be the basis of an estate plan, forgetting the money in the house and all the other stuff. It's what message do you send to your children?
Absolutely. I love that. And I love that view of it and wish more parents really understood planning in that light. Before we run out of time here in a minute, I want to take a quick turn and talk because the other thing that your firm is really specialized in is business exit planning. So I know that when I interviewed your partner, Jamie Moore, he talked to us a lot about that. But I would love for you to touch on for just a minute about your process with business exit planning and the role that you play in that process.
Well, thank you very much. And I have a great respect for Jamie Moore because he is a certified exit planning strategist, and he's been trained by some of the best people in the country on how to handle proper exit strategies for our business clients. The one thing that I would say where the role that I possess is, as you can imagine from my background, one of the processes of getting rid of your business, which is your baby that you created And I see business owners all the time having great respect for what they've done. I built this business from nothing, and now it's here, and I want to let go of it. You want me to get rid of my business? Well, that's what you're telling us, sir, ma'am. You want to get rid of your business. And what I focus in on with them is, what are you going to do with the rest of your life now that you have it without this entity involved in your life? And that's a hard question. I used to hear from my dad all the time, well, Dave retired the other day and they're burying him on Wednesday. And you hear stories about people who leave their work, retire, they work 40 years, they retire, and they die the next day. That's not what this life is about. That's not what this life should be about. So I focus a lot on, what's your vision for yourself after you leave this work? And I'll give you a quick story that helps you identify why I do this. We had a late friend of ours passed away tragically early. She was the head of the business incubator unit at Oakland University over north of Detroit. And she traveled all over the world helping build businesses internationally. And one of the things that she told us, I said to her when she came back from Europe, I said, what's it like in Europe? I haven't been to Europe in 40 years, but I said, what's it like in Europe to deal with business? And she said, let's do a role model. Let's do a role play, and I'll show you exactly what it's like. And she said to me, oh, Richard, tell me about yourself. Well, I'm a lawyer and I do a lot of work with estate planning and business succession. And okay, so is there any interest you have? I got a family and that kind of stuff. And that's the very traditional American way to introduce ourselves. Who are
Right.
you? I'm a lawyer. I'm a doctor. I'm a teacher. I work at the General Motors plant down the street. I own my own business. We identify ourselves with work. She said, you asked me that question. Oh, Amy, tell me about yourself. I have a great faith in God. I'm a believer in protecting the environment. I work very hard at building communities around me. I love my family. And oh, I'm a corporate manager who owns a $10 million business selling auto parts to Mercedes-Benz. The last thing of importance is what we do for a living. What the most important is what we do for a life. And we get that backwards in this country. And so part of our mission is to help our business owners when they take that baby and hand it to somebody else, whether it's family member or somebody within their business or a third party off the street, so to speak. What is their vision of themselves going forward? And that's one of the things that I work with most dedicatedly with our clients.
I love that. And I love the perspective and the story that you told on that, because it is so true. Life is so much more than what we do for a living. But here in the States, that's the first thing we say about ourselves. If you say, who are you? That's the first thing I would jump in and tell you.
Right.
Oh, let me tell you about my work, not my faith, not my family, not my spouse, none of those things, not the hobbies and the great things that we love to enjoy. We always start, so much of our identity is found in the career that we have here in the States. And so I love the perspective. That's not how it needs to be. And I like that you're coaching that into your business exit planning strategy. It's such a unique perspective that I don't feel like a lot of people in this industry really focus enough on. That's definitely touching more on your counselor side for sure, walking people through. That's a hard struggle. And we've seen that with a lot of our estate planning clients who've been lifelong business owners. They retire, and within a couple of years they start another business because their identity was wound up in who they were as a businessman for all those years, or a businesswoman. And so we've seen that happen over and over. You have the missing piece of the puzzle there with that. I love that. Before we run out of time, is there anything else that you want our listeners to know?
Wow, that's a very open-ended question and a
It
dangerous
is.
question to give me access to. I think if I were to say anything to the people who are listening to this, is that embrace your own life, embrace what you have, be proud of what you have, and make sure that you have the peace of mind of knowing that it's going to pass on to whomever you want it to pass on to in the way that you want it to pass on to them, and be at peace with yourself when you do that.
That is the perfect nugget of wisdom to end the show on. Great stuff. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
for all of our listeners listening in, thank you again for joining us. I am your host, Katie Beth Hand, and my guest today is attorney Richard Kerbawy. And for more information on Richard and all of the work that he does, you can visit his website and find all of his contact information and even schedule an initial appointment with him at mooreandkerbawy.com. We will link that for you in the show notes. Richard, thank you again so much for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed it.
Katie Beth, great to be with you. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.